Welcome, you're watching Vox News, your daily evening news with Rita Kamkumo. Our headlines today: Malawians return to polls this Tuesday to elect their president after the justice annulled Peter Mutharika's victory last year due to fraud. The opposition coalition in Mali vows to extend its protest movement further until President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta steps down. Nigerian scientists have announced the discovery of a preventive vaccine against coronavirus targeted at Africans. Out of story today, Malawi's historical presidential election rerun took place this Tuesday. Malawians headed to polls for the second time in just over a year to elect their new president, following the cancellation of Peter Mutharika's victory in the May 2019 presidential election over fraud accusations. Some citizens arrived at dawn at their polling center, ready to take part in the much anticipated vote.
I am one of the people who were here by 5:30 a.m. We had to warm ourselves by the fire while waiting to the polling center to open.
I have cast my vote because I want poverty to end in our country. Life is hard for us because we're always food insecure.
Our expectation is that this election should bring about change in Malawi.
Our responsibility is to go and vote. That's why we took time to pray for our country, so that Malawi can be saved, Malawi can be preserved, that God can intervene in whatever we are doing as a nation.
The two main candidates of the election rerun, Peter Mutharika and Lazarus Chakwera, are once again facing each other after the Malawian justice ordered the holding of new elections earlier this year. However, this time around, a candidate will have to garner more than 50% of the votes to be declared winner, contrary to last year's election, in which Mutharika won the election with 38.5% of the votes against 35% for Chakwera.
I believe that Malawians' quest for justice is actually being answered today, and I believe their rights will be respected. I have confidence in the Electoral Commission to do what is right.
President Peter Mutharika, who has always denied bail at irregularities and fraud accusations brought against him, urged Malawians to put him back in power so that he may continue with his development projects and eradicate poverty as he promised. In Mali, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta is under pressure as tens of thousands of people, led by the opposition coalition, are still demanding his resignation. The opposition coalition vowed on Monday to extend the reach of its campaign across the nation until the president steps down.
We therefore want to tell our people that our position has not changed at all. We are staying the course in demanding the resignation of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. We will intensify the protests throughout the country and outside the country in a determined and amplified way. It will result in a response that will satisfy the demand of the people, that will, however, remain mobilized and serene.
The newly formed opposition coalition of religious leaders, politicians and civil society figures is also demanding the release of leading opposition figure Soumaïla Cissé, kidnapped on the 25th of March by jihadists.
Two essential demands. The first is the resignation of the President of the Republic and his regime. The second is the release of our brother and friend, the president of one of the branches of the M5 RFP, the Honorable Soumaïla Cissé.
While the M5 RPF movement is determined to oust President Keïta by organizing massive protests in the country over a perceived lack of government response to jihadist and inter-ethnic violence, poor governance and electoral fraud, the convergence of the Republican forces, composed of political parties, associations and civil society organizations, expressed their support to President Keïta, arguing that dialogue is the only way to ease political tensions. In Nigeria, Foreign Affairs Minister Jeffrey Onyema denounced on Monday attacks perpetrated by unknown people on a residential building of Nigeria Embassy compound in Ghana's capital city, Accra, on Friday. The minister condemned these attacks that saw a building demolished and deemed the incident unjustified. Nigerian authorities have summoned Ghana's envoy, chargé d'affaires of the High Commission of Ghana to Nigeria, Mrs. Eva Dino, to ask for an explanation. The Ghanaian authorities are currently investigating the incident. Nigeria announced on Monday that the Economic Community of West African States is backing its candidate to head the World Trade Organization after Brazilian Roberto Azevedo decided to step down as Director General a year early. Former Nigerian Finance Minister Ngozi Okonjo, who currently serves as a Special African Union envoy to help combat coronavirus and as a board chair of GAVI, the Vaccine Alliance, may be in line for the post since Africa has never headed the Geneva-based body before. The regional body is calling on other countries, especially African nations, to endorse Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo's candidacy, citing her long years of managerial experience at the top echelons of multilateral institutions. On the health front, Nigerian scientists announced on Friday the discovery of a preventive vaccine against coronavirus, primarily targeted at Africans. Dr. Oladipo Kolawole, team leader of the COVID-19 research group, said at a press conference held at the Adekele University in southwestern Nigeria that he had found a locally developed vaccine. The study, which led to the discovery of the vaccine, received initial funding from the Trinity Immunodeficient Laboratory and Helix Biogen Consult, totaling 7.8 million nairas, or about $20,000. After running a series of tests, Dr. Kolawole, a specialist in medical virology, immunology, and biotechnology, said the vaccine will also work for people from other continents. The vaccine is expected to be available in at least 18 months, as a lot of analyses and studies, as well as approvals by medical authorities, are still required. On the security front in Ivory Coast, Defense Minister Ahmed Bakayoko made a major announcement in Abidjan on Monday following the deadly attack perpetrated by jihadists earlier this month at a military post in the Kafolo region on the northwestern border with Burkina Faso.
We traced it back to the commander in Mali who was arrested, and I can tell you that the head of the commander who led the action was taken yesterday. And with our investigations, we will go further. We will establish who he was in contact with, who is behind it.
It was the first assault carried out by Islamic extremists on Ivorian soil since March 2016, when an attack perpetrated on the southwestern beach resort of Grand Bassam killed 19 people. On the international scene in Belgium, as statues of late King Leopold II, a symbol of the country's bloody colonial history and power in Central Africa, are being targeted by anti-racism protesters, the country's first Afro-descendant mayor, 72-year-old Congolese-born Pierre Compagnie, believes it is time for Belgium to acknowledge its colonial past.
We are facing what happens sometimes in some families. Unsaid things. Unsaid things can cause huge problems later on when people find out about them. That's what we are dealing with here, the unsaid. We need to make excuses, to warm up relationships, to make people realize that unacceptable things have happened. To me, it's very simple. Excuses need to come from the government and from the king.
C'est très simple.
Pierre Compagnie also believes that systemic racism, which is still deeply rooted in the country, must also be addressed.
Je crois que le problème de racisme ici.
I think the problem of racism here in Belgium compared to abroad is a problem of education. It's a problem of education. In our education, we have allowed ourselves to laugh at the other person. In our education, we have often allowed ourselves to be silent about what is true and dangerous.
Compagnie wished Belgium would have seized the opportunity to face up to its past in 2009, during the centenary of King Leopold II's death, which the state allowed to pass without celebration, embarrassed to revive debate over his controversial legacy.
Though unassuming from the outside, this house is full of history. Civil rights activist Malcolm X is said to have stayed here several times before his death in 1965. Today, Aaron Sims is fighting to transform the place into a museum. Like him, the majority of residents of this poor suburb of Detroit are African American. He voted twice for Barack Obama, but in 2016, dissatisfied with the Democrats, he voted for Donald Trump.
I wanted to send that message and say, hey, you know, I know what I'm getting with this guy. You guys didn't do nothing here, and we supported you to this point.
Nearby, a prominent community activist with a famous name is weighing in on 2020. Martin Luther King III, son of the late civil rights icon, is pushing for change.
This next election is one of the most critical of our time. I think that there's got to be an effort to bring new leadership to the table, because I really think the country is not going in the kind of direction that brings people together so we can resolve some of the next issues.
80% of Detroit's population is black, and the city had been a Democratic stronghold for decades. But voters here simply didn't show up for Hillary Clinton in 2016, helping Donald Trump win the state by fewer than 11,000 votes. Local activist Danielle Atkinson says candidates in this election will need to work hard to overcome voter apathy.
That's what we were missing last time. I think women's vote, women of color in particular, their vote was taken for granted. And so they weren't talked to about these issues. And so what we're trying to do really is train voters on asking the questions that are going to get them excited.
Once a booming industrial powerhouse, Detroit declared bankruptcy in 2013 and is now among the poorest and most dangerous cities in the U.S. Members of this youth group aim to help Detroit's voters find their way back to the polls next November.
We understand everyone doesn't have access to how the political process works, let alone how the heck to make sense of what's happening right now. And what we find is when we provide that information and we're able to have a robust conversation, not just talking about the upcoming sexy election, young people are more willing to engage.
Democrats held a series of televised debates here in this downtown theater in July, hoping to inspire local voters. But for now, neither party is dominating in the key state of Michigan, which means Detroit should be a crucial battleground for candidates on the road to 2020.
That's it for today. Thank you for watching Vox News.